Hello, Tosha.
Hello, Peter. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. And yourself?
Is it as cold in Cape Town as it is in Worcester?
It's a little bit cold. Yeah, rain's just started again. So, yep, another cold day.
We don't get as much rain, but I'm telling you, the wind is freezing and we have snow on the mountains. So, yeah,
Mm,
I'm very grateful that I'm not living on the streets in these days and times. So,
for sure.
Peter, how was your first experience on YouTube with us the last time you and I were on?
Oh, it's nerve-wracking, I tell you. But to learn to relax and just have a nice chat, I'll get there, I think. Yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Good, good.
You
Well, you did
you
well.
and Boilang are both you and Boilang are both pros.
I wouldn't say that. Well, not about myself in any case. Bolilang maybe. Bolilang is amazing. For those of you who are watching and haven't seen Bolilang in action yet, really, he is just something else. I just love Bolilang and how he does things. The only trouble that I have with Bolilang is that he has a way of saying things that I can't distinguish whether he's actually making a joke or not. And I think if we took clips of some of his sayings and we played it to religious viewers, they will take him seriously because he is just he's just so funny and so good.
Yeah, no, he's
So
brilliant.
so Peter, I've been lazy today and I didn't really thoroughly prepare. I looked at the topic for what we have to talk about. Well, I haven't been lazy. I've been working on school stuff. But last night I had an interesting show on Free Thought Hour with Susan Jerbick about women and skepticism, and we did speak about how how strange it is that in the 21st century we still have people who actively believe that there are such things as witches, and who still actively believe in what somebody like now I forgotten his name, Campbell, who wrote about myths, would call sympathetic magic in the 21st century. So why don't you start us off and just give us your ideas about religion in the 21st century, the fact that it's still here and seems to be, well, at least in some places, growing.
Yeah, it is a strange one. Where does it come from? Is it growing? Well, it's not growing everywhere, which because you do see some stats coming up now and then of its decline, and that's always it's always encouraging. From my point of view, I see its decline in places as encouraging purely because of the science denial, or largely because of the science denial that's involved in it. In terms of witches and that, I also read a very interesting thing the other day about witch hunts and things like that. It is an odd one. I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, for sure, you probably get legitimate witches. I mean, are they Wiccans? I don't know a lot about it, but not witches that make magic spells and broths and things like that. But yeah, it's bizarre and concerning, I suppose, at the same time.
Yes. So I don't want to derail us by talking about witches. Maybe that's something we can talk about another time because there is in my opinion, there's a relationship, especially these days, between belief in witchcraft and witches and witchery and belief in and religious beliefs. So when I say witches in this context, I'm not talking about people who identify as Wiccan or paganist or something like that. I'm talking about the real old-fashioned witches, and also the brand that we find in Africa, the brand that people like Leo Igwe fight against, where people are killed because they believe to be witches. Now, let's just get our facts right about the 21st century. So, of course, that's all relative. We do know that if we had another, if the guys who ran the French Revolution, if they stayed in power for much longer, it wouldn't have been the 21st century. It would have probably been the, I don't know, the first century or the third possibly. So the idea of the 21st century is relative. I think it's important to wrap our heads around that. And the reason why I'm saying that is I think we have to remember that progress outruns human capacity for erroneous beliefs.
Yeah, fair point. Hopefully education also helps us along these lines, access to information where you can see that maybe these things are no longer true. Things don't work like that anymore, and we need to get with the 21st century.
We need to get in pace with what science tells us. So there's a very good video on the Myth Vision podcast about why we feel that need to believe in God. And maybe that explains why, though formal religion might not be growing everywhere in the world, humans have this native inbred, not evolutionary tendency to believe in external agency. And although we are in the 21st century and we live in a technologically massively advanced era. I mean, if you look at technological advances in the past 200 years, it's just incredible. If you just look at the phones that you and I grew up with and what we have now, I mean, it's common knowledge that the cell phone that you and I carry, that our kids carry in their back pockets, has more computing power than the computer that sent man to the moon. So the exponential progress in technology has just been astonishing, and yet our minds, our complicated, non-created primate brains have not yet let go of superstitious belief, because we are in many ways still very primitive in the way we view reality. I don't know if you know anything about evolution and evolutionary psychology. Do you know, for example, when sometimes when you fall asleep, just before you fall asleep, you go like that, and you wake up with a start. Do you know anything about that phenomenon?
No, just a little bit of personal experience, that feeling that you're falling out of your bed or something, but not the psychology behind it.
Well, it's actually, I don't know if it's psychology or biology, but the people in the know reckon that as modern as we are, that is a primitive leftover from our time as primates living in trees, where your survival depended on remaining in your tree, hanging on to your branch that you chose for the night, because down below was more danger than up in the trees. And that feeling that we sometimes get it's sort of a throwback to that reflex, where to fall when you would be almost certain death if you were a little one in particular. So that just shows me that we are actually we've outpaced ourselves in terms of what we believe and how we experience reality, and the technological advancements that we've made. And that causes major trouble for us, because although we live in this advanced technological age, our brains and the way we see reality is very primitive in many ways. So religion is a manifestation of our primitive brain, where we believe in agency and we believe in things like life after death. So Peter, what would you say is the most silly idea that we still cling to? In fact, there's evidence to the contrary.
I would have to just sum it up in one word and say God. But I mean, that's a very big word. And it obviously can be broken down into many small subsets. Your fear of death, your wish for eternal life, the hope, the need to do, the want to do good in this life because you might be judged on it come Judgment Day. Yeah, I probably can't sum it up very concisely, but just that simple belief that there's something bigger than you out there, which is a big belief, but is not justified really by any evidence. Making me think about what something you were saying a bit earlier, where a lot of it might just be ignorance. I don't know how the sun came to be, but it's much easier for me to give credit to an entity as opposed to looking it up and figuring it out and saying, okay, it is actually pretty well understood. That is one of the scarier things for me, when people would argue against established facts and information, but from a position of ignorance. It's not a good look.
I see Lali Kulbanus mentioned belief in heaven. So that is something, if we break down this belief in God, which is obviously very overarching, if there's one belief that I think is most harmful and that we need to get rid of with education, it's the belief in a soul. I think in the 21st century, we have so much evidence that there probably is nothing about us that continues to exist in some realm after our brain has finally stopped receiving or do we send, or how do you know anything about the brain and the electrical impulses? We don't send or receive. It's just chemical electrical energy impulses. And I think if we can just get past that idea and match that up with what 21st century evidence shows us, life would be so much easier for us all. And I wish we could get somebody to comment on that for us, because you and I know what we believe. I don't believe that there's anything beyond the memories that other people have of me as an individual. When my brain activity has stopped, I don't think there's anything about me that will continue in any way, shape, or form, except atomic. And that wouldn't be me, because it would just be a collection of atoms.
Yeah, that is an interesting theory, interesting idea. It would be nice to know the impact it would have if you could educate people out of the belief that they have a soul. But it probably goes hand in hand with religious faith. You must have a soul, I suppose. There must be something that goes to heaven after you've left this mortal realm.
Well, I can't see, especially Christianity. I don't see Christianity or Islam, for that matter, having any purpose or function if there's no soul. Because, I mean, the whole premise of Christianity is that you are saved so that you can go to heaven or not. And if we abandon the belief in a soul that lives to go somewhere, then what's the use of believing in? Okay, I just want to make sure. Hang on 1 second. I switched to another. I'm back. I switched to another router that is actually very close to me. Tasha's, yes. No. Well, the internet connection, I just swapped to another connection. So I have a new soul. Peter. We can continue. I have a new soul.
I suppose if we're talking about religion and things that cannot be shown to exist, a soul would be an easier target, an easier thing to demonstrate or prove than something bigger. If the guys are going to push their beliefs, start with a soul. Start with something that's demonstrable or verifiable or measurable there.
Yes, and I do think that the idea of a soul should be, in principle, be falsifiable. I want to quote Karl Popper here, who was a 20th century philosopher, and he emphasized the idea of it's not possible to prove something that's not falsifiable. So you basically go about proving something wrong, not proving something right. So the idea of God is so vague and so fuzzy that it's almost impossible. It's not falsifiable. But the idea of a soul, with 21st century technology, it can become falsifiable. Oh dear, I see Atheist Republic Cape Town commenting. Does the soul equals consciousness? Are we going to go there?
Has that been a heated debate in the past?
Well, I just know that consciousness is a very sticky topic that hasn't been sorted out to my knowledge. And I don't think the soul equals consciousness. I don't think we've even succeeded in defining consciousness. In the 21st century, we've not yet been able to define consciousness. So I'm not going to even go there. Not today. But I think the soul is in religion at least, it's a fairly well-defined concept. That it just means that there is something that continues to exist somewhere, even though your brain has stopped producing electrochemical impulses. So I don't know. I don't want to talk about consciousness. Maybe we need another century or so to crack consciousness. And perhaps that is the one thing that might cause religion to survive into the 22nd century. I don't know. Maybe it's the riddle of the problem of consciousness. I've no idea. But Peter, if there was one thing that you would like to one aspect of religion that you'd like to destroy, or I don't want to use negative language, that you would like to be rectified in the next 10 years, what would that be?
I suppose from my own personal experience, I'd like to see religion not used to influence important life decisions. A lot of bad can come from something like that. Use your common sense, use a bit of critical thinking, be a bit more skeptical. Don't thrust it on your kids or any kids. Let your life unfold according to what is known, according to our reality. That would be one thing for me.
Well, I can't agree more with you about not exposing children to religion. And, do you think that in the 21st century, our views on religion have progressed? Or do you think we've gone backwards? And I'd very much like anybody watching to join us, because Peter and I, we can chat and talk away, but the more the merrier. So please, anybody watching or listening, please join us. Religion in the 21st century. I sometimes find it really hard to believe that we still have religion in the 21st century. I don't know if you've seen the movie Oppenheimer yet.
I haven't yet, no.
And nor have I, but I've watched quite a few documentaries, and that's how many, 80 years ago? And even despite something as massive as conquering atomic power, hasn't led us to let go of our superstitious beliefs. Hang on. What do you think superstitions are? Do you think religion is a superstitious belief?
I don't think that would be fair to superstitious beliefs. I think maybe it's something a little bit separate. I suppose they do tie in together, but my view of a superstitious belief would be don't walk under a ladder, don't open your umbrella inside. I think these things can be easily come around, and maybe they become a bit more of a tradition than an actual superstition.
That's interesting. I never thought of it like that. So, because the religion that I grew up in was very much against any form of superstitious belief. So maybe that's why, to me, it's quite an important question, because if religion itself is a superstitious belief, it's highly ironic that the religion that I grew up in taught me that superstition is actually a sin that should be avoided. What about religions like Buddhism or Hinduism? What do you think about the impact of those in the 21st century, where we've learned about mindfulness and things like that, and many people tie that, rightly or wrongly, into religious beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's maybe getting a bit more spiritual than religious. I know the followers of Buddha or Buddhism can do some pretty bad things as well, but I don't know enough about them, I'm afraid.
What about spirituality? You just mentioned the word. It's one of my pet peeves, just by the way, disclaimer. What's your opinion about spirituality replacing religious belief in the 21st century? Because it's become sort of, well, in certain circles in particular, it's sort of in vogue, to say, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. I don't think there's a need for either. It's just, I don't see why it's necessary. It doesn't give you any answers. There's no data. Yeah, does not compute for me.
The word spiritual, of course, in my opinion, what does it even mean to say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual? So what do you mean? What does it mean to be spiritual? Does the hangout with secular Kenyan, what exactly is spirituality? Don't you want to join us, the hangout with secular Kenyan? Because perhaps it's not a bad idea to talk about spirituality, because I really think that many people are moving away from traditional religion in this day and age and moving into spirituality. We're sort of going back to the 60s, make love, not war, and that type of thing. Crystal wearing, incense. He's from observatory. That's funny. Is that you? Aren't you in observatory?
Me? No. I imagine that's Mr. Crew.
The hippies from observatory.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a search for some kind of deeper meaning, an answer to questions that you can't answer yourself without shoehorning spirituality in.
What types of questions do you think we can't answer for ourselves? Do you think, and that brings me to something that I really think in the 21st century, we need to get back to talking about dying. Just 50 years ago, most people died at home in their beds, surrounded by their families, and religion was something that they used to cope with the grief and sort of making sense of the end of life. And in the past 20 or so years, maybe even longer, 30, 40 years, we've desanitized death. And I don't want to get all dark and depressed here, but I think, to get back to what I said in the beginning, I think one of the reasons that we still have organized religion, and in certain parts of the world, certain religions are growing, in other parts it's declining, is because of our fear of death, because we are the only species, as far as I know. Peter, which one question can spirituality answer? That's a good question. I don't think it answers any questions. I don't think spirituality, thank you for that contribution, secular, hangout with our friend from Kenya, whose name I've forgotten. So I think that the reason religion is still alive and well, because it's definitely alive and well. It might not be growing, and the traditional churches might be on decline, but I do think that religion is still religious beliefs, in fact, or no, not religious beliefs. In fact, religious beliefs are still very much prominent in our daily lives, and I think it's because we are the only species who live aware of the fact that we will die, and to me that is the root of religion. The fact that we see burial traditions as long ago as 30,000 years ago. I mean, Homo naledi has been almost for certain proven to have practiced burial rites, albeit very primitively. So I think if we want to help people to cope with life without religion in the 21st century, we have to desanitize death. And I think that means we have to talk about death, we have to talk about dying, and we have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that this life and our consciousness of it will end. Oh dear, do I sound depressing? Do I make you depressed, Peter?
No, it's making me have deep thoughts. I mean, it must be summed up as simply the fear of death, which maybe can be broken up further by saying, is it the fear of dying, or the fear that once you're dead, there's nothing there? Fear of dying, I can fully appreciate that. You don't know how it's going to happen. You don't want to suffer. We do, in this age of information, see so much suffering. But the fear of being dead, I'm not sure how we could counter that. You know, you and I will be well aware that, well, we're imagining that if we die, we're gone. That's it. It's over. Others don't see it that way.
I don't think most people are afraid of being dead. I think most people that they're so afraid of dying that they don't think about the fact that where was I before I was born? And being dead will be exactly the same as that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying that we need to desanitize death. Because when we start talking about death and dying, then people will realize that if you can't remember who and where you were before you were born, then after you've passed this life, it's the end. And then they'll realize that they're not really afraid of being dead. They're afraid of what happens before you die, and afraid of letting go. And I see Atheist Republic Captain, I've seen enough. I don't want to live forever. Well, I don't think I've seen enough, but I definitely don't want to live forever. I think it's a tragedy that people think that they want to live forever. Do you want to live forever, Peter?
Absolutely not. No. Same as Dean. I'm not near the end yet, but I can't imagine much more. No, I'm happy. I'll take my innings whenever it ends.
And I think those are the types of conversations we need to have in the 21st century, where we've realized that cryogenics probably won't work. Many diseases that we couldn't treat or cope with just 80 years ago, we now can extend people's lives for many years and help them to live good and happy lives. And that has sort of, I think, enhanced our fear of dying. And I would wager that people in past eras were much more accepting of the fact that they were going to die. And I don't think people were so afraid of dying because most people, by the time they reach 30 or 40, in the 1940s, most people, by the time they were 30 or 40, would have seen at least 2 or 3 members of their family die. I mean, miscarriages were as common or more common then as they are today. And people lived to about 50 if they were lucky, 50, maybe 60. And you just knew that your grandparents would die, and they would probably die in their beds at home. And I think religion gave comfort in a way that it doesn't anymore today. Oh, Dean is bringing in something. I'm waiting for the first AI cult. All hail the singularity. Yeah. AI. What about religion and AI?
I know you don't want to talk about consciousness, but I had thought of AI a few minutes ago as well. If we get to a stage where somehow your consciousness can be encapsulated or manipulated, can you put it in a computer? Can your essence then, your consciousness continue there? Many years ago, must be about 10 years ago, I read a very short piece about how immortality could lead to insanity. I can't remember the details, but it always stuck with me that, if you're promised immortal life, what's to say that you won't go mad?
Well, I'd go
Forever?
mad. I mean, the whole idea of immortality to me is just chaotic. But AI does bring in a few very interesting ideas, because if we could download our memories, does that mean that we could live on in a sort of virtual reality?
Yeah.
And would that be,
I mean, you may well have. Sorry.
No, continue.
I'm just thinking, if you had the essence of Pete or the essence of Tertia in a machine, we're probably not even that far away from it. But just having a machine talk back to you with the same characteristics, but you wouldn't have the person there. You'd still have to let go of that body. That person is no longer there. You're not going to wake up in bed of a morning next to that person. You can't ring them up, or I mean, you could probably ring them up on the phone. Can't go out for dinner or whatever. Yeah, I think you need to let go somehow. Put people to rest,
Yeah, and I think religion. Do you think religion gives us the opportunity to put people at rest, or does it do the opposite?
I suppose, I mean, I can see it from both sides. In one way, you can be assured by your pastor or your priest that your departed one, your loved one, is still there, still looking down on you from above. But yeah, I think maybe it does sort of retard that mentality at the same time by letting you hang on to it, because we don't have any evidence that you're ever going to see that person again, or that they are looking down on you from somewhere.
It's funny that you say looking down on you. Let me read the Hangout with Secular Kenyan. It's like going to a party, and instead of enjoying it, you spend the whole time worrying about the fact that the party will be over at some point. That's Hitchens, eh? Yes, absolutely. And what you just said, Peter, about the AI and the essence of the person. I don't know if you watched our Free Thought Hour last night with Susan Jerbick, but she exposes psychics, especially those who do hot readings. And the idea of a soul is directly related to that, because if there's no soul that continues into the everlasting or into the ether, there's nobody to make contact with. So perhaps having our essences downloaded into AI is not such a bad idea. Who's to say God didn't go mad a few million years ago? I get bored after a few eyes by myself. Well, I think God is completely insane if he does exist, because I mean he's like Idi Amin and Stalin and Gaddafi all rolled into one times 10. But the idea that we could, if we miss that person that has departed, then and listen to a voice recording of them or something like that, it's much better than having a medium say things that's probably, well, not probably, definitely not true, and giving you comfort with false hope. So maybe AI is the answer to ending religion. I just wonder, yeah, that's such an interesting idea. Would there be a new AI religion? Do you think we'll ever, as a human species, not have religion? I mean, because what is religion? Religion is the belief in some supernatural being. So would the AI perhaps become the supernatural? Because is the AI natural? What is it? What is natural?
Yeah, well, everything we know is natural. That's our reality, except for the supernatural by definition. Um, I I often think about this as well, and I think, if you look at religions that have come and gone, or practices, the Greeks, the Egyptians, they came and went. No religion has stood the test of time yet. We've only given them a very short period. It is obviously my hope that we do outgrow it. If we start looking at AI as maybe the next best thing, well, that's okay. AI is real. We know who created it. It's a tangible entity. You can work with that, and it's only going to know. Well, at this stage, it's only going to know what we tell it, which is something I think we can cope with.
That is such an
And
interesting.
your prayers would be answered if you had to pray to the AI, unless you were load shedding.
Well, sorry, AI, make my cough go away, please. Let's see how that one works out for us. Yeah, it's fascinating how dominant religion still is, even when we speak about things as advanced as artificial intelligence in the 21st century. But I don't know. I think we have spoken about our relative ages, and when I think about these things, I grew up with Buck Rogers. Did you ever watch Buck Rogers on TV? Are you one of that generation, or was that too long ago?
That was right about my time, but I don't remember much. I remember the Tom and Jerry's and things like that.
You were like my brother. You were not nearly, well, I don't know, was it Buck Rogers intellectual, but it's very, very enlightening to look back to what in the 80s, what our view was of the 21st century. Well, I think Buck Rogers is set in the 25th century, but I mean, that is only 400 years from now. And the fact that we have no idea what the future looks like is actually also interesting when we think about religion. And when we think about advances in technology, I was listening to somebody who spoke about the nuclear weapons, and he said that the trouble with artificial intelligence is the same as it is with something like an advanced weapon. People in the 1700s, if you ask them to envision the weaponry of the future, they would have thought in terms of horses. They would have thought in terms of maybe a very, very, very big horse, or maybe a very strong type of metal, or maybe a cannon that could shoot really, really far. And now what we have, it's so far removed from what they were used to in the 17th century and the 15th century, that the trouble with these things is we cannot know what we don't know. And when it comes to religion, if there's just one thing that I would like to teach people and to help people think about, is that religion pretends to know things that we can't know. There's absolutely no way that we can know the supernatural. Even in the 21st century, the only thing that's happened is that things that used to be supernatural, like viruses and germs and pathogens, have become natural, because the moment we can explain something, it becomes natural. Then some of the Star Trek religions are yes, Star Trek religions. Those I was never allowed to watch Star Trek. I just have to say, because it was too hedonistic. It was not allowed in my household. I wasn't allowed to watch Star Trek. Were you allowed to watch Star Trek?
Yeah, we did do the Star Trek, Star Wars, all of those. I'm not that kind of a fan. I don't know the difference between the two, but I do like to watch a bit of sci-fi. I don't know a lot about those guys, but if you look at them, religion doesn't play much of a role there, does it? Their vision of the future was entirely, do we call it realistic? You can imagine everything that they're doing there as being quite achievable.
Yes, and that opens up in my mind a little bit of a conundrum, because I've heard the saying that if humans can imagine it, we can do it. So if we can imagine a God, then does that mean that we can create a God? Have we perhaps created the ultimate God without knowing it? So yeah, I think I'm befuddling my own mind here, because I very firmly believe that there is no God. But if we can imagine God, does that mean that we can create a God? Well, I suppose that's what we do when we created religion.
Yeah, I mean, we've created the gods and we've created the religions, but we still can't decide on a coherent definition of what it is. You might just think of it as the man in the clouds. You may think of it as nature all around you. There's no, because there's no accepted definition, we still can't pin it down to anything, except maybe the bearded guy in the clouds that intervenes in our daily lives.
Well, on a his interventions are very selective. If you just look at all the terrible things that are happening around us daily, then those interventions.
Yeah, he's not very good at his job.
No, definitely not. Absolutely not. Yeah, so we are in the 21st century, which to me sounds sometimes odd to think that we are in the 21st century. And if I think back of what I know of history and the optimism that people went into the new century, the 20th century, the 1900s, I mean, it was a time of such great optimism, and at least we haven't yet had the Third World War. So I hope that our optimism for the 21st century is more successful than the optimism for the 20th century was. I want to read Lali Kulbainis's comment. Humans switch off rational thinking when confronted with a charismatic person. Anyone could theoretically create a religion. Look at the cults. Yep, that's true. I just wish I could create a religion. It would solve all my financial problems if I were able to lie and dupe people to the extent that most cult leaders especially do it. I just think that I wouldn't be able to be that immoral to willingly look people in the eye and lie to them and take their money and make them dependent on you. Our Lady of the Immaculate Fleecing. If only I could. If only I could. Yeah, I've often contemplated the thought. I'm just too honest. I just think that I'm too. I can't lie. Not like that. Not on a scale like that. And to keep it up. Maybe that's something that we need to. Go ahead.
If I'm just trying to think off the top of my head of some cult leaders and extremely charismatic people, and the ones that are popping into mind all had a bit of a screw loose somewhere, didn't they? I'm trying to think of anyone that was actually a functional or a decent human being.
No, because to be a cult leader, and you have to be dishonest to a certain degree. And last week we spoke to Philip Venter, and even good, well-meaning gereformeerde predikante, you know, the dominees, I think even they have to be dishonest to a certain degree, because they know that the Bible cannot be the literal word of God, and yet they never tell the members of their congregation that. There's secular Kenyan again. We all create God in our own image, vengeful, jealous, petty. Yep. And I think the people, the most vengeful and the most petty people are the best at creating gods. The other gods don't seem to have the same traction as the vengeful, petty, mean ones, you know.
I think we're touching on Hitch again here, but didn't he say something about this is exactly the characteristics you would expect of a man-made God?
Yep, absolutely. I want to just refer back to what you said about the religions that we know have died out, like the Norse religions, the Egyptian religions. I think the oldest religion is Zoroastrianism, which still has about 2,000 or 3,000 adherents in the Middle East. And if we think about Christianity, it's actually quite young in the scope of history. It's not a very old religion. I mean, it's been going for just over 2,000 years, and Islam even less. Judaism is quite old. But the fact that humans are what, 30, 40, 50,000 years old, and one of our oldest religions is about 4,000 to 5,000 years old, then in the bigger picture, religion is quite a new invention in the scheme of things. And I do hope that it doesn't live into the next century. I do really hope that within the next 20 to 30 years, we can, should I use the word eradicate? Is that too hard? Is that too aggressive? I don't want to offend anybody, but
I like the word, but maybe we should, if we started viewing it more as myth instead of an actual part of your functioning life. But yeah, that would be a nice situation, I think. You tend to find that religions get replaced when newer ones come along. What do we replace the current bunch with? Well, what else is there? I mean, I think we're too smart now to invent a new religion. Those days are over. Now we're just going to have to get rid of these ones.
I see Dean asking, doesn't the fact that we've always had some form of religion show that we have evolved to be religious? I think we have the potential to move beyond religious belief. I think we definitely are prone to erroneous beliefs, and most religious beliefs, in my opinion, are erroneous. I can think of one religious belief that is accurate, and I'm not talking about the pithy things like humans, we love and we forgive. To me, those are not religious beliefs. Those are humanist beliefs, and those ideas help us in our interactions with other people, and we are social species. But I can't think of any religious belief that has shown itself to be true. If you think there's a God, there was a creator, sin, the idea of sin, the idea of a soul, I don't think we've evolved to be religious. I think that our brains are susceptible to making thinking errors, and that leads us to cling to false beliefs, because we struggle to understand and live in reality. So I don't think we've evolved to be religious. I think we are evolutionary prone to believing things that are not accurate and true, because we do live in a very complex reality, and our experience of reality is way more limiting than we think it is. So fortunately, I don't think we've evolved. I think we can free ourselves from religious thinking. And I hope that we can manage that in the next 100 years. So is there any 5 minutes? Start wrapping up. So my conclusion, I don't think we'll eradicate religion in the next 100 years. I think we have a lot of work to do to make many more people understand how our brains work and why we tend to be religious. And that should be our goal, to make as many people as possible understand why we tend to be religious. And we'll have to go with that if we want to live without religion in the next 200 to 300 years, which fortunately I hope I will not be there to see.
It's interesting. I often ask people, what is exclusive to your religion? What is the exclusive truth? What's unique? Show me an example of something that's divine or inspired. And there really isn't much. There's nothing that's exclusive to them that makes it any better or more true. Maybe it ties into evolution, like you were saying now, but I would see that more as our quest for knowledge and for answers. 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, maybe religion was the best answer for questions that we were asking. As we grow as a species and, as mankind progresses, I think we'll evolve ourselves out of this, because I don't see the need. I don't see any requirement for it beyond maybe a little bit of placebo.
As soon as we understand how placebo works, hopefully we won't have the need. So I don't know if we have good news or bad news. I just think that we still have a ways to go. And I would like to emphasize the fact that I think we need to focus on education about myths, education about different religions, education about the harm religions do, and education about how our brains work and how flawed our brilliant brains in fact are. And Peter, your closing comments?
I just want to go with education. I love that. And Lali, who's done a couple of comments, she and I were talking today about bring religion back to schools, make it a part of education, but bring all of them back in. So you're going to have a religious studies class, but you're going to learn about all of them. And once you realize that there's multiple religions making multiple claims, many of them similar, but vastly different, you're probably going to think, well, I think this is maybe a bit of myth. I don't think any of this is true. So there's my closing thought. 21st century, educate everybody.
Educate everybody, and use the internet to educate your kids and get them to see who we are and why we want to be religious. And then we'll stop being religious in the way that we are being religious now. Peter, it was so much fun. Thank you so much for spending another hour with me on this very cold Sunday. Go well. I hope to see you soon again. And maybe next time we'll have some callers. And goodbye to Secular Kenyan and to Lali and to Dean, the Pope of Atheism. May you be blessed. Hallelujah. Say goodbye, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you, Tasha.
Thank you, Peter.